Welcome everyone to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators. And today we have Meggan with Generally Unquotable. She has a Mormon news channel. Welcome,
Welcome,
Meggan.
Megan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So we wanted to know a little bit about your background and just how you got to where you are today, how you started your channel, and how it's going, I guess.
Well, okay, so background. How much background do you want here?
Whatever's necessary, I think, for people to understand how your channel got started and where you're at today. So
Okay,
Right, not
sure.
like what your favorite primary song was, but who you were and things that might have shaped you growing up, like 5 minutes or so, something like that.
Okay, sure. So I was born in the covenant and I did all the Mormon things. I was baptized when I was 8. I got married at 20 after knowing my husband for about 4.5 months. We had our first
That's not
baby.
bad.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we met, we got
That's-
engaged 2 weeks later, and we got married 4 months after that.
Okay.
And then we had our first baby 11 months after that. So at our first wedding anniversary, we were holding our newborn and eating the top of the cake that we got out of the freezer.
Yeah.
So common among Mormons.
Yeah, that is pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
I
were.
was a
Oh, go ahead.
13th month of marriage. We had a baby.
Close enough.
I don't know. That seems like it took a long time.
It's what
Yeah,
God
right.
wants. God wants babies.
Yeah. Yeah, the prophets have said that many times. Prophets/God. So
were you going to school? Were you going to college?
I graduated with my associate's degree from Rick's College, and then I met my husband the summer after in California. I actually thought that I had graduated from Rick's College and I wasn't married yet, and that my prospects were kind of over for marriage. I really did think that. And so I moved out to California. I was living with my sister and her family, and I met my husband at church. And I was like, oh, wow. Whew. Now I'm not going to, go forever old maid. And
save from a mission. You didn't have to go on a mission.
Yeah, because, women go on missions nowadays, but back then,
21.
I have 6 brothers, and they said a lot of unfavorable things about women who went on missions. And so that was not something that I ever wanted to do, because I thought it meant, I wasn't worthy of marriage. I wasn't worthy of a man if I went on a mission.
This is something that happened with me. And when my youngest brother went on a mission, I had conversations about it with him very specifically, just kind of how damaging that was, and like how much that hurt to hear, and also it's just stupid, because the things that guys complain about women doing on missions compared to what they have done and men have done on it was always really dumb reasons, dumb excuses, and I really do think that's what it was. It was really just excuses, and honestly just misogyny. And my brother still did it when he came home. He was like, I'm not marrying a returned sister missionary. And I was just like, why are you doing this? But he did. So I guess maybe I win in the end. But yeah, it's really sad, like how damaging I think that is. And it was something I didn't understand. Like, they get all this glory, I guess. There is kind of this missionary worship in the church. And so it's like, it's so great. And it's such a bad thing, usually, like if men don't go. And Jean can talk to that, about that kind of stigma for the guys who don't go. But to have it like flipped so completely different for women, that you are less desirable to, and especially because women typically went because they wanted to. I went because I wanted to. There wasn't the social expectation. So I did it because I wanted to serve God, and learn how to talk about the church and like bring people to the gospel, like it sounded like, why wouldn't anybody want to do that? And then to know like I'm less marriageable because of that. But yeah, not only that, I'm curious because you got your associates, and it is kind of true in a way that once you leave college, especially at BYU, and if you're not in Utah, or in Idaho, in that kind of Mormon corridor area, it is a lot more difficult to get married post graduation. But yeah, I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit more,
right.
Or did you think about getting a bachelor's?
It's not like you're off the market, but you're kind of like a little note on the bulletin board somewhere in some excluded area, like,
Yeah.
hey, looking for a mate.
Well, you're just not as surrounded by
Compared to
as
being
many
out there,
people.
right?
Yeah, I mean, because at college, you're surrounded by other singles, and so when you're, like, out in the real world, so to speak, then this opportunities are less, so, yeah, do you have anything you wanna say about that?
Yeah, I was legitimately worried, right, that my time had passed. And I was trying to figure out what school to go on to get my bachelor's degree. I knew I didn't want to go to BYU. I'm not really sure why. So my parents lived in Payson. They still live there now. And I think maybe part of it was just that I didn't want to be that close to home. But so I was dating a guy when I graduated. And I thought we would get married. And then he broke up with me that summer. And I was kind of trying to follow him to Ogden to go to Weber. But when that fizzled out, I was like, I'm out of here. So then I went to California. And I didn't really know what my prospects would be out there. I was like, well, I'll just get a job and I'll kind of see what happens. But I ended up, then I think it was the second week I went to church there. I met the guy who I'm married to now. So
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Whew, I can still be Mormon. I can still be a holy Mormon woman.
You were married in the temple? Which one?
Yeah, so we wanted to get married in California, but the Oakland temple was closed for cleaning. So we ended up getting married on January 5th in the Manti Temple. It was very cold.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And between the time that we got engaged and we got married, we did a lot of things we shouldn't have. I don't know how specific you want me to be about that, but
just if you liked it. No, I'm just kidding. Right. I'm channeling my inner bishop.
Right.
So we were apart for a while. So we were dating and together, and then we got engaged, and we were apart for a little while because I went home so I could help my mom prepare for the wedding. And in that amount of time, I, got a ton of guilt, and I was sort of ready to go to the bishop, but I was like, I can't cancel this whole wedding. What if the bishop says we can't get married in the temple? So I just kept my mouth shut. And then when we reunited, it was so that I could go through the temple for the first time. And in the initiatory, I was told that I was pronounced clean. And I was like, okay, this is it. Yep. Woo, this is my clean slate. So then after that, I was like, okay, we got to put the brakes on this for 1 month until we get married. And so that I can, be worthy, we can go through the temple and everything.
That's right. Netflix without chilling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the Netflix.
So how did things turn out? I guess for some people, it's marriage and family that starts to be the beginning of the end, I guess, maybe. So one way to put it. But it's different for everybody. And so, yeah, how was it for you?
As far as like church activity goes, so I was incredibly devout, and my husband came from a family, he grew up in California. So it was a little bit more relaxed. And, they owned an art gallery, and they framed art for gay couples, which I thought was kind of pushing the envelope a little bit, but I was very orthodox, followed all the rules. And so our marriage was very rocky. And we didn't really know each other before we got married, right? We'd known each other for 5 months from the day we met till the day we were over that altar in the temple. Yeah. And so it was hard. It was hard because I expected him to be what my dad was when I was a kid, very strict on all of the things. He better make sure we're having prayer.
Yeah.
Yep, he better make sure we're studying our scriptures, and we better be having family home evening every single night. And he wasn't accustomed to that. So then he felt all of this pressure to be this person that he wasn't. And I didn't know how I could be worthy if he wasn't doing these things. Like, it was all tied together and enmeshed. So it was actually very rough. And we had 6 kids in 10 years. And during that time, we lived with his parents for 1.5 years. And then we moved up to Idaho. And when both of us went back to school, he almost had his associates and I had my associates. And we both went back to school to get our bachelor's degrees when we had 1 baby already. And then I had our second baby, my finals week of our second semester back to school.
Wow.
And then I was pregnant with our 3rd child when I walked over the stage with my bachelor's degree. So
what was your degree in?
Art. So I did graphic design and photography. trying to focus on that. When I was getting my associate's degree, I was doing pre-med.
Oh, yeah.
Once I was married and I had babies, like I had to think of something that I could do from home. And I thought, well, I could be a photographer, right? Digital photography had come on the scene really strong. And a lot of Mormon stay-at-home moms were, photographers. So that's what I thought. I'll do that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad I mean, that's how I thought too. And I wasn't even married. I wasn't even dating anyone seriously, but I was still making my decisions like with this person that I didn't even know who it was as the primary focus. And that's one of the regrets I have looking back, is just thinking how much I was making decisions about my life with somebody, around somebody that wasn't even there, rather than what what was in my heart and what I wanted. So, yeah.
That's
But
right.
you did pretty well, because I know a lot of Mormon women would not have finished school, and that's not a judgment on them. I think that's a lot to do together. So if that's, it's like a can't thing versus a don't want to or giving up thing. But I'm happy for you that you were able to still like continue that path and at least get that accomplishment in for yourself. So that's good. That's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was
Where do
really
you
stressful. I remember when I walked across the stage, I'm pregnant and I've been for 2 years doing school and taking care of babies and all of that entails. And I just cried. Like it was such a relief to be done trying to make all of that work.
Yeah.
Wow.
Where do we go from there?
Well, at some point you end up in Alaska, right?
Yeah. So,
How did you get to Alaska? That's what I want to know.
What's that? Okay. Yeah. We'll do the quick little. So I graduated in 2006. My husband graduated in 2007. And then we moved to St. George, Utah, where he had his he was already working for the city of Rexburg, but we realized pretty quickly that he was never going to make enough money there for us to even live in a small apartment. And so he got a job in actually Washington City, which is next to St. George. And we lived there for 2 years before we moved to Alaska.
That's right. Washington.
What's that?
Washington.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
the old timers still talk. Yeah.
No, St. George was my Mormon experience that was most like that new show that's out, The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. Like I felt like the neighborhood that we lived in could be those women's neighborhood and that friend group. And I felt we were poor. We already had 3 kids by the time we moved there. And I felt like I am never going to measure up. Even the people that I was friends with, like these women would buy pants that cost $300. And I was like, that's a month's worth of groceries for us.
Yeah.
I don't understand, but their husbands had jobs that paid a lot more and they didn't have kids until they were a little bit, more well-established. And so, yeah, but when I watched that show, I think that reminds me of living in St. George quite a lot.
Yeah.
So those were real Mormons. Those are real Mormons to you.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems very familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then after that, we moved to Alaska. My in-laws opened a sport fishing business up there. And we originally went up because my husband was helping them with that business. And then his degree is in Parks and Recreation. And so he became the Parks and Recreation director we lived on an island in the town of Petersburg where there was 3,000 people. And he was the Parks and Recreation director. And the church there was tiny. We were in a branch, and pretty quickly we were a family of 8, had my last 2 kids while we lived there. Yeah. And there were
double the size of the
like
ward
30 to 35 people every week. And we were 8 of those. So
there were how many people?
30 to 35. We'd get visitors, people who came up there to do sport fishing during the summer and stuff.
Yes, but you're 1/4 of the ward of this branch.
Yeah. Of the branch. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like, if we stay here long enough, we're going to have all the callings. So I was Relief Society president while we lived there for, I don't remember how many years, but quite a few. I was pregnant with my second youngest when I became Relief Society president. And then I actually asked to be released when my youngest was maybe a toddler. So
you had to arrange your own meals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was hard being a Relief Society president there. So when I asked to be released, I didn't know. So I was so devout, right? I did all of the things. And when things started to bother me, I didn't know that I had a shelf.
Mhm.
Okay. Things were piling up on it, but I didn't know it was there because
Yeah.
I was just so faithful. I had never considered any other point of view. I hadn't considered, like, I even have parts in my journal where I was like, I don't know a lot, but I know I'll never leave the church, right? Because
Yeah.
that wasn't an option.
In
And
fact, if you
so,
don't know a lot, that almost guarantees you stay in the church.
yeah, yeah. It was good that I was staying naive. Like, I didn't look outside church approved sources. And I spent so much time studying church approved sources that I wouldn't have had time for anything else between being a mother and doing graphic design and photography on the side and church callings. Who has time? Who has time to do anything else? So I think I started putting things on my shelf, like looking back, even though I didn't know I was, when my oldest daughter was about 5 years old. There was one time where she did something, and I don't even remember what it was. And I, got after her for it. And she looked up at me like, Mom, what are you doing? I mean, she's 5 years old. And I, in my mind, remembered looking at my dad that way and thinking, like, do you understand how much you're hurting me right now?
Yeah.
Right? And so at that point, I realized, like, I want to do something different. And this was before we even lived in Alaska. It was when we were in St. George. And so I got parenting books. We had no money. So, like, the library was my friend. And I just started reading them. And there were little bits in there and pieces that I started picking up where I was like, God's not a very good parent.
Yep.
Right? Like, if I
Yeah.
parent the way that I have been taught God parents, my kids are going to hate me.
Yeah.
Like, I'd seen that cycle happen in my own family, and I already didn't have the best relationship with my parents. And then I started reading these books, and that, I think, was the beginning of my journey out of the church, even though I had no idea that's what was happening, because that was probably in like 2008, 2009, somewhere in there. And I didn't stop going to church until 2018.
Yeah.
That's right. If I parented like God, we would have had like 2 or 3 floods.
No.
Right?
No, yeah, I think
Children.
that's the thing. That's kind of amazing when you think about it. I even you're being self-deprecating, Jean. Just the fact that it's actually not hard to be a better parent than God when you think about it. As poor of a parent as anyone ever feels like they are, very few really inflict the amount of harm. Other than the really really abusive types of parents, those are the ones that really match God the most. I'm wondering. I know this is kind of a fascinating that we didn't talk about earlier, so this is like a new thing for me. But I wonder if there's specific examples you remember. If not, that's fine. That could always be. We always tease. We could do a topic, or do this as a topic another day. But yeah, I did also want to say, besides looking at God compared to these parenting books, I want to know your thoughts on this, because I feel like the way the church treats people and kind of teaches us to parent in a way, like besides comparisons to God, generally is very authoritarian, and it's very much looking at children as, well, I mean, first of all, like, authority is right, whether you're right or not. That's very steeped in Mormonism, that even if your leaders are wrong on something, it's better, like, to be faithful and to listen without questioning. And that's kind of how we like raise kids to be. Like, I know my parents would say to me, like, for whys, or if because I'm the parent and you're the child. And that was how some arguments were won at the end of the day, was like, I have this over you, so that's it.
Then
Anyway,
there's
I
the
wanted to know.
Jody Hildebrandt style.
Yeah, it's just very, like, I think punishing, if kids are acting up, then it's like you got to lay the law. And at least to me, I never really saw much in Mormonism that was really about understanding where a person's coming from when they are apparently misbehaving. So was that also part of where you, like, did you feel that as you were learning things, like, oh, this is not how Mormonism really taught me to be a parent, and it's different? Because Mormonism, it doesn't specifically tell us to parent that way. It's just all in the structure.
It
You
just
know what I
happens.
mean?
It's in the
So
Yes.
air.
Yeah.
So this interesting thing happened. I had studied Mormonism so much, right? Like I was always in the Book of Mormon. I was constantly listening to conference talks. Like when conference talks came out in audio format, I was all over that. And so like when I went to church on Sunday and in Relief Society, they'd pull up this talk and they'd be talking about it. People would be like, wow, I've never heard this great story. I'm like, that's from conference. I've listened to it 17 times. Like I knew the material.
Yeah.
And I kept trying to glean from the material, like ways to parent. I kept trying to find it. And so then when I started reading the parenting books and understanding better ways to parent, then when I would hear a conference talk, I'd be like, oh, they said that one little thing. Okay, that kind of says what this parenting book says. So it's like I was the problem still, right? Like they'd been saying it all along and I just didn't see it until I'd found these outside sources that taught me how to do it. And then I could like tie the two together.
Yeah.
I think
I did that too, actually.
Like apologist.
Yeah.
Yeah. The more liberal I started to get, I always thought that that's where the church was also, and that I was just catching up. But that I always thought the leaders were already there, even though,
In
yeah,
a way,
right? Like, I don't know if you do any
like,
amount of therapy, they'll tell you like you have to first develop a relationship with yourself, right? Which in the church, I was like, no, that's a big no-no. But then I heard that, reheard the scripture, love thy neighbor as thyself. And I'm like, oh, thyself is always there. It's always, I just didn't see it, right?
Yeah.
This whole concept that I have like 10 years of therapy I packed into one tiny little scripture. And I was like, they've been saying it for years. I just didn't hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you were deconstructing sort of as a parent from sort of like parenting style. Many parents deconstruct because they end up having children that are LGBTQ. And so you were like a parenting style deconstructionist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And thankfully I did a lot of deconstructing before I had children come out to me. So I didn't say to them what I likely would have said if it had happened, 10 years previous to when it did.
Yeah. That's good. That's got to be a relief, honestly.
Yeah. Yes.
As we were deconstructing, it came out that one of our grandchildren were identifying as LGBTQ. And my wife felt so much relief to not have to sort of, like soft hate,
Yeah.
And just to be able to love without judgment.
Yeah.
Or just have the fear and the concern over them that there's something really wrong with who they are. And, yeah. Okay. Where I distracted us. Where are we at?
So she's in Alaska, and Alaska is where many are cold, but few are frozen.
Yes. On the island in Southeast Alaska, it's not as cold as interior. So it was more rainy. It's actually a temperate rainforest. So it rained
almost like Seattle or something,
but
like
more rainy, like 300 days of rain a year.
Oh,
roughly.
okay.
A lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a rough place. It was a hard place to live. And if you can imagine, Mormons weren't well loved there. Like when they went to build their chapel, there was a lot of pushback that happened before we moved there. But there was a Bible church is where all the cool kids went. And then there was this little congregation of Mormons. And, we got pigeonholed into that group the second we moved to town.
Yeah.
So my husband was successful in his job, but I didn't really have friends when we lived there, other than a few women from church who I wouldn't otherwise have been friends with, but we were Mormon. So, we stuck together.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So then
when did things start to really escalate, or when does that avalanche really get going? I guess.
So we moved out of Alaska for 1 year and we moved to St. Louis, Missouri. And we lived in a super weird ward there and we fit in so well. It was wonderful. Like they were pretty lax on the rules and it felt very loving. And which was a good thing because all of this parenting stuff and me trying to merge the church with what I was learning was starting to escalate. And it's why I had asked to be released as Relief Society president. And then we moved to Missouri, and the ward was what I pictured God and Jesus would be like if they were the kind, loving part of, their personas that were also taught. So that ward was amazing. During that time, we took a trip to Nauvoo as a family. And while we were there, my husband was like, why do you think we needed to move to Missouri? You know, because of course God told us to go there.
Right.
And I was like, so I wouldn't leave the church. You know, we're sitting in Nauvoo and it's like a Sunday morning and the sun is coming up over the statue of Joseph and Hiram. And I'm like, it's so I wouldn't leave the church. So I hung on for dear life for that year in Missouri. And then we moved back to Alaska to Fairbanks. What's up?
One thing about Missouri, did you happen to go like walk where Adam on Diamond, where Adam, lived?
That wasn't on the list.
Just to see. It wasn't. We didn't really have any money
as much as Nauvoo. For some
reason. No one even said anything about where that was. I guess I could have looked it up, but no, we didn't do that. Like I think
it's like 60 miles north of Far West or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I was never a church history buff. When I studied the church, it was always scriptures and conference talks, mostly the Book of Mormon and General Conference.
Yeah.
It's funny. It wasn't until I saw the Book of Mormon musical that I thought about Noah leaving from Missouri.
Right.
Oh, well, I'm thinking about it now.
Yeah. I mean, Mount Ararat is back in the Middle East. I just assumed, it was kind of a miracle that Noah was around, the Middle East area, because that's sort of what the Bible is. It's all about civilization and Mesopotamia and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it was almost a miracle to me that after the flood, Noah, after going all over the earth, ended up just a few miles away from where they left. Not understanding about Adam on Diamond, and that's where civilization was in Missouri, and that's where
allegedly
Noah must have left from. Yeah.
Missouri is the place. Man, I should have visited while I was there.
Yeah, like the church doesn't really bring attention to it all that much for good reason.
Right. Yeah, they don't want to try and make sense of that.
They don't want to talk about it. Yeah.
So what brought you back to Alaska?
Are you back in the same ward, same island and everything? Or
no. Yeah, so when we moved back, we went to interior Alaska, which is far more north. That's the part that's cold. Very cold, like 40, 50 below in the winter and short summers. Yeah. So when we moved back there, I had already had enough experiences and I wasn't reading the CES letter. I wasn't studying church history. I was still just studying like psychology, parenting, self-help books. But I was starting to become this mama bear, like fiercely, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Just like protecting my kids from what was happening to them at church. Like, oh, you can't go to girls' camp because, one of my daughters had dyed the bottom half of her hair purple. And one of my other daughters showed up at Young Women's after volleyball wearing volleyball shorts and a dress over the top. And the bishop called her in and said, your dress is too short. And she's like, well, I either could have gone home and not come or show up like this because this is what I have to wear, Like I started really being bothered, not so much about how I was being treated, but my children. And I was getting very protective of them. And after we lived in Fairbanks about 6 months, I took a job and requested to work Sundays because honestly, this is going to be a little embarrassing, but for two reasons. First of all, just not to go to church because I was like, I can't, the ward we were in, there was us. And then the majority of the other people in it were lawyers, doctors, and dentists. And we lived in an area with them. And so I would tell people, oh, we live in this area. And they'd be like, wow, that's a nice area. And, our kids' friends would come over and they'd be like, your family has money. And I was like, no, we do not. We just got lucky with this house. And anyway, so we did not feel like we fit in. And then all of this other stuff was happening. And so I took a job to work Sundays because I just I needed a break. And then I also thought maybe, just maybe, someone will notice. I really, embarrassingly enough, wanted someone to notice that I wasn't there. And nobody noticed.
This is about 7 years ago.
It would have been in 2017. So yeah. And so for 6 months, I did not go to church. I worked every Sunday and nobody reached out. Nobody said anything. And I was like, okay, this is the feeling I was getting from this ward that we don't fit. And now I'm I'm just certain that nobody cares. And so that on top of everything else was really pushing me away. Still, I hadn't studied any of the history or anything. I didn't have any of those things also pushing me out of the church. So then I changed jobs and I started working at the high school. And so then my Sundays were open. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go back to church. So I did. And I would just sit there and play. I don't know if this game on my phone is called 1010. It's like Tetris. It doesn't take any strategy really or anything.
Yeah.
And so I would be listening, but I would just be playing this game. I didn't talk to anyone. I wasn't associating with anyone. And about 6 months later, my husband was like, we got home from church on a Sunday and he's like, you need to stop going to church. And I was like, what? He's like, you're miserable. And I was like, but go read my journal.
Yeah.
It says I'll never leave the church, right?
Yeah.
Like,
where was he at, by the way? Like, do we need to provide some context there?
For him, so like I said before, he wasn't raised so strict
Rigid.
as I was, right? So he always attended church and he went on a mission and we got married in the temple. And he did the things that first his parents were requiring him to do, which wasn't a ton. And then tried even more when I was really pushing for him to be the priesthood holder, the man of the house. But for him, not going was a relief. Like maybe I would loosen up a little bit and not be like, oh, how come we didn't do family home evening 2 weeks in a row? Like, you're a pretty bad priesthood holder. And so, yeah, he hadn't been going through a deconstruction process or anything. Just church was not as big of a deal for him. He also wasn't feeling like we fit in. He would get pushback in elders quorum when he would say stuff that was like emotionally healthy.
Yeah.
And so he was like, you need to stop going. And he knew that if he kept going, I would keep going forever.
Yeah.
And so the next Sunday, he's like, we're all staying home. All of us, none of us are going. And our oldest 2 kids at the time were already way ahead of us in the process of going out of the church. And so they were like, yes. And then our younger 4 were just like, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll just play, like
Yeah.
they were young enough. And our son, who's our 3rd child, he'd been bullied by kids at church pretty badly. We just didn't fit in that ward.
Yeah.
You guys were like physically in.
Cool. What's that?
Physically in, but mentally damaged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought we were just going to take a couple weeks break, and we never went back after that. So that's when I started. The first podcast episode that I listened to was Radio Free Mormon talking about the Book of Abraham with Bill Reel. And I was like, whoa, wait, what? I was like, I knew the church was damaging me on an emotional level, but I didn't know that it was also lying, right?
Yeah.
Was that Mormonism Live, or was that?
I'm trying to think if Mormonism Live was around then.
What year was it?
Like,
was it during COVID?
No. It would have been like 2018 or.
Okay, yeah.
But it was definitely Radio Free Mormon and Bill Reel talking about the Book of Abraham, and just being like, oh, this image that Joseph Smith said he translated from the papyri to these words, they don't match.
Yeah.
And I had never ever heard of that. So
right. Isn't that crazy? And that's it's been known for years. Yeah. Like, it was debunked very early on in like church history times. And yeah.
So I went to my husband and I was like, have you heard of this? He's like, well, yeah, we talked about it on my mission. I was like, why didn't you tell me?
Whoa, I did not know on my mission. Yeah.
Yeah. So he went to North Carolina. And so I think there was a lot of Bible bashing that happened, and he learned things that way. Yeah. But he had all the apologetic answers. Right.
Yeah. I think I only first heard of Radio Free Mormon when he appeared as like a blinking light on Mormon Stories when they had Robert Rittner on. And I was like, who's this Radio Free Mormon guy? Why can't I see his face or whatever? And then I looked up more and saw that John does do an interview with him at some point. And I, during COVID summer and fall, when my wife and I would go on walks, we would binge listen to Radio Free Mormon, starting from his first episode, The Great Mormon History Cover-Up.
Yep. Yeah. So once I listened to the one about the Book of Abraham, then I was like, okay, I need more. And that's when I started running, because we weren't going to church, but we also weren't talking about it, my husband and I. Like, we were just not going. It's like we just put it behind us and we're just moving on with our lives. Only he was doing that, but I was deconstructing, and I was doing it alone, right? There wasn't ex-Mormon meetups like, posted everywhere. And I found the ex-Mormon subreddit and was looking at things on there. But what I mostly did was I would run 6 miles almost every day, and I would listen to Mormon Stories and Radio Free Mormon, and just, for hours and hours and hours. And that's where I learned about everything.
Yeah.
So this actually, after you heard of everything, when did you start listening to the Mormon news updates on your news feed?
Oh, okay. That would have been when I was working at the high school. So it was probably like a year or two after I left the church so I learned that you could go into Google and tell it to send you certain news with certain topics. And so I went in and I just put Mormon, right? So then in my email every morning, I would get Mormon news, and it's like, the SEC scandal and, all these big things are happening. And I'm just aware, like, I would get to work and I would get going and I would get, my coffee eventually. And then I would read the Mormon news, and, it was just like a little 5 minutes. Sometimes I wouldn't even click on any of the articles. I would just read the headlines.
Look at the headlines.
Yeah. Just like, I want to tangentially know what's going on, because I still know a lot
Family
of
and friends.
Yeah. Who are Mormon. And I just want to kind of be up on what's going on. So I started doing that at work, just a little 5-10 minute thing in the mornings.
And then what made you do TikTok for it?
So I had a TikTok, and when I started my TikTok, I was just silly on it. Like, in Fairbanks, instead of hauling your trash like a normal trash service, if you live outside of the city limits, you haul your own trash, and you go to this place called the transfer station, and it has just like rows of dumpsters, and then there's a covered area where you can put things that you don't want but they're still usable. And so we would go there as a family, and we called it the free store, and like the kids would find clothes and we would find furniture and all these things. And like, a lot of my first TikToks are like, we found this weird outfit at the transfer site and my daughter's like trying it on and we're just laughing. Like, it's just silly.
That sounds fun. Yeah.
It was just fun. It was like, living in Fairbanks is a little different here. Some of the things that we do that
you were eventually able to re-garbage things.
Yes. Well, and it was great because we had 6 kids. Money was always tight. And so we didn't pay for clothes for our kids for the majority of the time that we lived in Fairbanks, because we could get it all from the transfer site.
So did you do a TikTok saying, here's some cool stuff we found at the tent area?
Yeah. I mean, every couple of weeks I would be like, we called it transfer site chic. And so like my daughter would model the clothes, and sometimes they were silly, but we clothed ourselves that way. There was great stuff there. And especially if you got there when a bag had just been set, we'd be like, there's a hot one, And so like it had been rifled through, and like, especially if the clothes were like folded and clean, you're like, okay, this is going to be.
You're wearing transferables.
Yes.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I'll still put something on and be like, oh, transfer site chic today. Like, I still have stuff from there. Yeah. So that's how my TikTok started. And then I was just sitting down one day, I was reading the news in my inbox, and I was like, you know what? I should just read some of this on TikTok. I'm already reading it. I'm already sitting here. I've got my TikTok channel. And this was like in November of last year, maybe December.
So were you able to do 3-minute TikToks or just 59-second ones?
No, you could do up to 10 minutes at that point.
Oh, okay.
So I usually kept it around 8, but it was hard, right? Because I'd be halfway through an article and then it'd be like, oh, your time's up. It's not like you can record a long episode on there and then cut it down. Like, it would cut you off at 10 minutes. So I would just like oh, here's a cool article. Here's one paragraph from it. And then I'd give a little commentary, and I started doing that. And then one of my friends in Arizona, who's also ex-Mormon, she one day sent me an article about a kid who had been killed at a Halloween party in Arizona, where she lives. And then a second article that went back to like 2000 or 2002, I think it was, talking about a gang of white Mormon boys who were doing similar things in the early 2000s. And then this boy this was last Halloween, who had just been killed at a Halloween party. And like, is there a connection between this group of kids who was doing this 20 years ago and this group of kids who's doing it now? And I read little snippets from both of those articles, and it like
That
blew
became
up.
viral.
Yeah. I don't know, like viral is probably like a million views or something, but for me, it was a lot of views. I was getting like maybe a couple hundred or 500, like felt like a lot,
Yeah.
And so it got a lot of views. And that's when I was like, okay, I'll probably just keep doing this. It seems like people enjoy it, and I'm already doing it. And so, yeah, then I just Monday through Friday, I was like, I'll pick a couple of articles each day and I'll talk about them and then just post it. And then the government started talking a lot about like, oh, TikTok might go away.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, like, do I care? Right? Like, do I just let it go? But then I have people, who'd be like, this is helping me deconstruct. This is helping me not feel crazy. And I'm like, I still feel like that person, but I remember in the beginning being so grateful that there was an avenue where I could quietly on my own listen to something and have someone validate that the problem was the church, not me. Because I need that constant validation. I needed it then, and I still need it now, right? And so I was like, I am okay if there's 5 people out there in the whole world who I'm providing that same thing for. And if that's all it is, it's good enough for me. And so that's when I was like, I think I'll, also start putting stuff on YouTube, because that way, if TikTok goes away, I can just be like, y'all know where to find me, and it's going to be over on YouTube. The platforms are different, and they cater to different video types and lengths. And, a video on TikTok will sometimes have 10,000 views, and on YouTube, it'll have 1,500 views, or vice versa. And so I never know what, the exact same video on both is going to do, but it's been good. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
I don't have any follow-ups.
So let's see. We could talk about recent news. Recently, you got to be on Mormon News Roundup with D-Base. So that was exciting.
Yeah,
how long ago did he contact you?
So we were going to do an episode in July, and then something came up for him. And so then he's like, can we do September? And I was like, it's going to be a little bit of a busy time for me, because I was helping my daughter move from Alaska down here.
That's right. Maven probably pushed you out. Maven became a priority, and she appeared in July, and D-Babe was like, Maven or Meggan. Okay, Maven.
That's okay. Maven's awesome. So
yeah, that's all good.
I will concede to that. But no, like when he contacted me, I was so nervous. Oh my word, I was so nervous, because he sent me, I don't know, a message on YouTube or something, and I can't even remember if it was YouTube or TikTok. But I grew up in the middle of 14 kids, right? Yeah. The attention was never on me. I was a really good student, but I was quiet.
Yeah.
Right. And I had my 6 kids, and then like if I needed to be the mama bear, I could speak up, but like I just was not ever wanting to be the center of attention, because when I was a kid, if I was getting attention, it was negative. Right? It was scary. And so
like there's some people who just seem better at it. So I don't know if I'm projecting my own feelings onto you, but it's just like there's those types of people who are the people who are like on stage or in front of cameras and stuff. And then there's people who are behind it or who are not on, like there's people that don't belong there, and I'm a don't belong there. So
and it's always weird to hear actors being interviewed and say, oh, I'm so shy. I'm like, how could you be shy?
You're like, what? Yeah.
And have millions of fans and stuff like that. And so I actually commented underneath some video that Meggan did in like the end of May or beginning of June, and said, hey, come on our show. And then, I didn't hear anything. So then I did it again last month, and she goes, well, I emailed you.
Yeah.
And it's
It's like, I
so
did send
checked,
an email.
and she said, I sent another one. So I checked and it went to spam for some reason. I don't know why, but I'm glad that you said you sent another one. And so we got you on because of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yes, it wasn't that I was too big for you or anything like that.
Yeah.
Or that
I feel like
busy.
everyone is. I mean, like logically, I know that's not true, right? But
Yeah.
in my little tiny anxious heart, I'm like, everyone else is more important than me.
Yeah.
So
That's right. That's why I'm a interviewer, because we bring on important people.
Oh,
There you go.
well,
There
I'm
you
going to
go.
say thank you. And then I'm going to later be like, oh, I don't know why I said that.
And then earlier, D-Base released his sort of like rankings, or what do you call it, of
like
news programs
review. Yeah.
just recently, and he had you as part of that as well. And I remember him saying something that, he wishes that you had guests or something like that. And it's like, well, on one hand, you're just the newscast, but I guess if you had, like, and now to our reporter on the scene, Maven.
Yeah, something like that.
Then I would need somebody in Utah, like now the person who's standing at Temple Square amidst the mayhem. Yeah.
That's right. Maven standing next to President Russell M. Nelson for his 105th birthday. Maven, what's it like there?
The only advantage of him being like living to 105 is just knowing that Oaks is would be stewing, another 5 years behind the scenes. But I don't know. It seems like he's already starting to get some power, but he still wouldn't have the gravitas. He wouldn't have the mantle of prophet. Yeah. So I wouldn't actually mind Nelson living that much longer, just to spite Oaks, I think.
That's right. If it was 180 years ago, Oaks could send the Danites out to do something to change the situation, but we're living the modern sensibilities now.
Yeah.
And they have all the medical care they could want, so sorry.
Right. Yeah, he gets the gold treatment, the king treatment.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think, when it comes to content creation in general, though, it has to be you, and that's what I think the best content is, what's authentic to the person giving it. And I don't know. I guess I'm going to disagree with D-Vase, but I'll risk it because he's right about a lot of things, and he's been very helpful to me personally. So I definitely don't want to look like I'm dogging that advice or just a commentary, because he's allowed to have his opinion as well, and his own show.
Here's what I recommend: that at some point you find a way to get Colby Reddish to do a little segment. That would be a good get. I think
but you don't have to, because what you do serves a purpose. There are people who want short, they don't want commentary, they don't want guests, they don't like the chit chat, they just want to hear the news. And that's what you were doing. You were reading the headlines, reading a paragraph, giving us a synopsis, enough of a gist of what was happening. And that's just perfect. So anyway,
maybe every now and then you can have a segment like Seth Meyers has now for a closer look, right? So he has this little 5 to 10 minutes,
like a little
deeper look into a story or something like that.
Yeah.
That's when you have more time.
Yeah, well, so in a past life, I also sold my art for a short amount of time, and when I was doing that, I realized pretty quickly that everyone was going to have an opinion about it, right? Like, oh, the next thing you do should be this theme or should have this thing on it. And at first, I was like, I have to do what they say, because that art was putting food on the table for my baby, right?
Yeah.
So I have to cater to the client because I need the money. I'm desperate. And it didn't take me long to realize that took all of the passion out of the art for me. And so I had to be like, you know what? We're just going to have to eat something less exciting. And I have to stay true to myself. And so having learned that lesson previously, when it came to creating something, I already kind of had that with me a little bit when I came to this. And so I do have people make suggestions all the time. A lot of them, though, are money related, oh, you need a better sound quality, or you need better camera. And I'm like, if you send me one, I'm happy to use it. Because I do know how to produce something better than what I am producing. I have worked in positions before where I had really nice equipment and really nice editing software, and I know how to use all of it, and I've done really good productions, but I don't have access to any of that. So I use my phone and my little microphone, and that's what I have.
You're making do.
Yep.
No,
Yeah.
honestly, I think that's great advice. We often end by asking for advice, but I feel like you've dropped some pretty golden nuggets already. I mean, first of all, being authentic to yourself and creating what you want to create versus what people are telling you to. And then the equipment thing, because there's a kind of a feeling for a lot of people that if I have something to say, I need the fancy equipment or no one will listen to me or it won't work or this, that, and the other. And so for you, I think that's actually really cool that you could say, I have knowledge and I know how to do these things. I am capable of that, but I'm here because that's what's realistic for me and I'm doing it anyway. And so maybe I hope that if we have any guests that are kind of feeling this kind of I need equipment thing, maybe can, take that out of your playbook and be like, no, I don't. I need me and I just need to start. So
that's right. And we want to send everybody over to Generally Unquotable. We'll have a link in the description.
All down below.
And anybody that wants to hear the dulcet tones of Meggan sounding better, then send her some money so that she can buy and earmark it. Say this is for a microphone or whatever. And she will be happy to take it.
There you go. Perfect.
So thanks so much for coming on to all our subscribers. Thanks for watching. And if you're new to the show, like and subscribe. And also head on over to Generally Unquotable again. And so anything else, Maven?
Nope, that's a wrap. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great rest of the year. Bye-bye.
Bye.